I looked at the computer screen, and the zero balance hit me harder than a mule's kick. I dialed the number with trembling fingers, not from fear, but from pure, contained rage. I needed it more than you, Mom. You're old now. What do you want so much money for if you barely leave the ranch? Roger told me with that voice that fakes affection but hides poison. I hung up the phone with a calmness that surprised even myself. My son thinks he stole my life savings, but he doesn't know that account was the bait the district attorney was waiting for to close the cage. I'm Josephine. I'm 78 years old, and if I could raise this ranch from the ashes when I was widowed, I can also teach my children that a mother is respected, the easy way or the hard way. The ceiling fan spun slowly above my head, slicing through the heavy, humid afternoon air. Here at the Ironwood Ranch, the heat gives no quarter, not even when the sun starts hiding behind the hills. I took off my reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose, feeling the skin, thin as rice paper, beneath my calloused fingers. My hands aren't soft. They never have been. They are hands that have hauled sacks of grain, doctored wounded horses, and signed checks to meet the payroll of 50 ranch hands for decades. But my son, Roger, seems to have forgotten where that strength comes from. To him, I'm just an old woman sitting in a wicker chair, waiting for the end of my days. I looked back at the screen, $0.00. The account ending in 408 was empty. It wasn't my main account, thank God, and thanks to my natural paranoia, the kind I inherited from my father and perfected over the years. But it was an account with a substantial sum, enough to buy a good John Deere tractor, or, in the hands of an irresponsible fool like my son, enough to lose on bets and empty luxuries in the city. Roger always thought he was the smartest of my 3 kids, or at least, he believed he was. While his sisters, Kara and Lucy, stayed close, working the land or teaching at the local school, Roger shot off to the city the second he turned 18. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted the world, and I gave it to him. I paid for his education, bankrolled his first 3 failed businesses, and was always there to clean up his messes. But gratitude is a plant that doesn't grow in barren soil, and my son's heart dried up a long time ago. "Hello?" he answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear background noise, music, laughter, clinking glasses. He was celebrating. He was probably celebrating my money. "Roger," I said dryly. My voice didn't shake. I learned years ago that showing weakness to predators is just an invitation to be eaten. The first ag account is empty. There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a nervous laugh, the kind cowards use to buy time. "Oh, Mom, you're so intense. Did you check it right? Sometimes the system glitches. You know the internet out there in the sticks is garbage." "The system works perfectly, Roger. The transfer was made yesterday at 3 p.m. to your personal account." He sighed, a long, exasperated sound, as if he were talking to a spoiled child, and not the woman who gave him life and paid for the perfect teeth he smiles with. "Look, Mom, I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah, I took it. I have this incredible investment opportunity, some cryptocurrency thing or whatever. You wouldn't understand these modern things. I needed it urgently, and you? Well, you have the ranch, you have Dad's pension. You're fine. Without my permission, Roger?" I asked, clenching my fist on the mahogany desk. "Mom, please. You're an older woman. You're old now. What do you want that money just sitting there for? To buy medicine? I'll buy it for you. To fix the roof? I'll send a guy. Money has to circulate. Besides, it's Dad's inheritance. Technically, it's mine too. Your father died 15 years ago, and everything was left in my name for me to manage," I reminded him, feeling a cold knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with the AC. "That's theft, son. It's a family loan." "Mom, don't be dramatic. I'll pay you back when it triples. I gotta go now. I'm in an important meeting." Kisses to my sisters, and he hung up. Just like that. He left me holding the phone, the dial tone drilling into my ear. I stood motionless for a long time. Outside, the crickets were starting their nightly concert, and I could hear the dogs barking in the distance, probably chasing off an armadillo. I stood up slowly. My knees ached, like they always do when it's about to rain, but I forced myself to walk upright. I went to the window and looked out at my land, acres of crops we had raised with blood, sweat, and tears. Roger looked at this and only saw dollar signs. I saw history, I saw sacrifice. I walked over to the display cabinet where I keep my treasures. They aren't jewels or fine china. They are things that tell the story of who I am. There, resting on a piece of worn velvet, is my grandfather's old brass grain scale. Next to it, a collection of rusted iron keys, the keys to the first barns we ever built. I picked up one of the keys, cold and heavy, and squeezed it in my hand until the metal dug into my palm. The pain helped me think. Roger was right about one thing. I am old. I have the gray hair, the wrinkles, and the aches to prove it. But he was dead wrong about the most important part. He thought being old meant being stupid. He thought age had softened my brain, that I was no longer the Josephine who negotiated with truck drivers through sheer force of will, the one who ran squatters off the land standing at the gate with nothing but her presence and an unloaded shotgun. The account he emptied wasn't just any account. 6 months ago, I had a visitor. A government auditor, a serious young man, came to see me about some irregularities in an agricultural co-op where I was the honorary treasurer years ago. Someone had been using my name and my old credentials to launder money through fake farm loans. At first, fear paralyzed me. At my age, the idea of prison or a scandal is terrifying. But the auditor, Mr. Carter, quickly realized I had nothing to do with it. Mrs. Montgomery, he told me that day, drinking coffee right here in this office. Someone very close to you is using your digital signatures. Someone who has access to your passwords. I didn't need to be a psychic. Only 3 people had access to my things. My 2 daughters and Roger. Kara and Lucy couldn't steal a piece of candy if they tried. Roger, on the other hand, would sell his soul for a sports car. Mr. Carter and I came up with a plan. It was agonizing. No mother wants to set a trap for her own son. It goes against nature. You want to protect them, even from themselves. I spent sleepless nights praying, asking God to give me another sign, hoping it was a mistake, hoping Roger wasn't a criminal. But the evidence was damning. Forged documents, diverted subsidy funds. If I didn't cooperate, I'd be the one going to prison, or at least I'd lose the ranch paying the fines. We need to catch him red-handed, Mrs. Montgomery, D.A. Marshall, the prosecutor assigned to the case, explained weeks later. We need him to move a significant sum from a monitored account directly to an account of his, no middlemen. That proves he has total control and intent to steal. So I opened that account. I gave it an enticing name on the online banking portal, Retirement Fund, Available Balance. I left the password written in a notebook I knew Roger would snoop through the last time he came to visit, which was really just to ask me to co-sign a loan. I knew he'd see it. I knew his greed would win. For weeks, the money just sat there, quiet. Every morning I checked with my heart in my throat, hoping the balance would still be intact. A part of me, the mother part, wished he would never touch it. I wished he would prove me wrong, prove that I was just a paranoid, cynical old woman, and that my son had principles. But today, reality slapped me in the face. He didn't just take it. He took it with arrogance. You're old now, what do you want it for? That phrase echoed off the walls of my office. It wasn't necessity, it was contempt. He considered me a useless piece of junk that could be looted because I was on my way out. I sat back down in my leather chair, the one that creaks with every movement. I opened the right drawer of the desk and pulled out a blue folder. Inside was District Attorney Marshall's direct line. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady now, like when I have to prune a diseased branch so it doesn't kill the whole tree. Because that's what this is. A pruning. Roger is the rot. If I don't cut him off now, he'll end up consuming everything I built. He'll leave his sisters on the street and stain his father's name with his dirty deals. I looked at the family photo on my desk. All of us, 20 years ago. Roger is smiling, hugging me. He looks like a good boy. My eyes welled up. I won't lie. It hurts. It hurts like having a limb torn off without anesthesia. But the pain doesn't stop me. The pain is just a reminder that I'm alive. I dialed the DA's number. "Mr. Marshall," I said when he answered, my voice ringing loud and clear in the empty room. "This is Josephine Montgomery. The bird took the bait. He took everything." I heard the DA giving instructions to someone on the other end of the line before answering me. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Montgomery. I know this is hard. We'll proceed immediately. Are you sure you want to move forward? Once we issue the warrant, there's no turning back. It'll be a federal offense because of the origin of the marked funds. I closed my eyes for a second. I pictured Roger at his party, toasting with champagne bought with my money, laughing at his mother, the old lady who doesn't understand anything. I pictured his face when the cops showed up. "Proceed, counselor," I replied, opening my eyes and locking my gaze on the darkness of the night swallowing my fields. My son needs to learn a lesson I forgot to teach him when he was a boy. In this life, you pay for everything, and this old woman still has plenty of ammo left to burn. I hung up and poured myself a glass of water. The water was lukewarm, but it tasted like glory. I felt light, like I had dropped a sack of rocks from my back. The sadness was still there, crouching in a corner of my chest, but the determination was bigger. Tomorrow would be another day on the ranch. I'd have to get up at 5, check the grain drying racks, and talk to the foreman about the fence in the north pasture. Life goes on. The land waits for no one, and neither do I. Roger thinks he took something valuable from me, but he only took money. What he doesn't know is that he just lost something you can't buy with any cryptocurrency in the world: his mother's protection. I stood up and turned off the computer. The black screen reflected my face one last time. I didn't see a vulnerable old woman anymore. I saw the boss of the Ironwood Ranch. And the boss had just declared war. The sun hadn't even peeked over the hills when my eyes snapped open in the dark. It was 4:30 a.m., the hour my body, accustomed to decades of military discipline, decided that rest was over. For an instant, just a brief, merciful instant, I forgot what had happened the night before. I forgot the betrayal, the dead phone line, Roger's mocking voice. But then reality dropped onto my chest like a wet sack of grain, making it hard to breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed. My feet searched for my wool slippers on the cold red tile floor. My joints popped. A symphony of old bones protesting the movement. Roger was right about that. I am old. My knees are a map of aches that predict the rain better than the local news, and my back carries the gravity of 78 years. But what my son, in his infinite urban arrogance, doesn't understand is that old age in the country is endurance. It's like the ironwood trees on the north property line. The bark might be cracked and gray, but the wood inside is so hard it breaks the axes of the men trying to chop it down. I washed my face with cold water from the ceramic basin I keep on the nightstand, ignoring the modern bathroom my daughters insisted on building for me years ago. The thermal shock woke me up entirely. I looked at myself in the oval mirror. Deep bags marked my face, dark trenches under eyes that, nevertheless, gleamed with a dangerous clarity. Old, I whispered to my reflection, testing the word, chewing on it. Old, yes. Stupid, no. I walked out to the kitchen. The silence of the big house was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I started the percolator just the way I like it, black and strong, no sugar. That dark liquid is the blood that keeps this ranch pumping. While the smell of fresh coffee flooded the kitchen, I sat at the solid oak table and opened my ledger. Not the computer. That had already served its purpose as bait. I pulled out my black leather notebook, the one where I use a fountain pen to write down what actually matters, the real yield numbers, the names of the trusted ranch hands, the phone numbers not listed in any directory. The invisibility of old age is a curious weapon. Over the last few years, I noticed how people started talking in front of me like I was just another piece of furniture. Suppliers discussed inflated prices, thinking the grandma didn't understand math. The young hands joked about their late-night escapes, not knowing I know every dirt road in the county. And Roger made the mistake of thinking my world had shrunk to knitting and praying. I took my first sip of coffee and felt the heat travel down my throat, giving me strength. I had to assess my resources, not the financial ones. Those were either locked in the trap or safe in trusts Roger didn't even know existed. I had to assess my human and strategic resources. At 5:30, I heard the engine of Elias's truck approaching up the gravel drive. Elias is my foreman, a man of few words, with sun-baked skin and a loyalty you can't buy with money. He's been with me since we buried my husband. He knows that if the ironwood falls, we all fall. I stepped out onto the porch. The dawn sky was painted in violent oranges and purples. Elias took off his hat when he saw me, an automatic gesture of respect that Roger had lost years ago. "Morning, boss," he said, leaning on the rail. "How are you holding up?" Like an oak, Elias, but in the mood to chop some weeds, I replied, looking him dead in the eye. I need you to prep the old truck, the beast. I'm going down to town. Elias raised an eyebrow. I rarely drove myself lately, much less that 1980 Toyota we kept for heavy hauling. You want me to drive you, Mrs. Montgomery? The road's washed out from yesterday's rain. No, I need to go alone, and I need you to stay here. Nobody gets into the main house today, Elias. Nobody. Not even if they say they're coming on behalf of my kids. If Roger shows up, I paused, swallowing the bitter taste of his name. If Roger shows up, do not open the main gate. Let him wait outside like any traveling salesman. Elias looked at me with his dark eyes, reading between the lines. He didn't ask questions. Out here, you learn to respect the boss's silences. Understood. I'll check the perimeter. Check everything. And tell the boys we're paying today's wages in cash. No transfers. I'm going to the bank to pull the payroll. I want everyone happy and calm. There's a storm coming, Elias. When he left, I went back inside to get dressed. I didn't put on the floral dresses I wear to host the church ladies. I went to the back of the closet and pulled out dark twill work pants, a starched white button-down, and my leather boots, the ones I've had resoled 3 times that mold to my feet like a second skin. I pulled my white hair back into a tight bun, not leaving a single strand loose. I strapped my husband's wristwatch, large and heavy, onto my thin wrist. Before leaving, I went to the study and opened the wall safe hidden behind the painting of the Virgin Mary. There was no money in there, just papers. I pulled out the original deed to the ranch, the will I drafted 5 years ago, and most importantly, a general power of attorney I had granted Roger a decade ago, back when I still believed in him. It was an old, yellowed piece of paper. I looked at it with disgust. That paper was the only real weapon he had left, beyond the digital theft. If he decided to sell off land behind my back using this document, he could cause irreparable damage before the law stopped him. With the documents in a worn leather briefcase, I walked out to the yard. The beast was there, purring. I climbed in, feeling the vibration of the diesel engine in my bones. Gripping the steering wheel, I felt a surge of power. This wasn't the smooth, power steering wheel of Roger's modern cars. This required strength. It demanded firm arms. I threw it into first gear, and the truck responded with a sharp jerk, rolling toward the ranch exit. The road to town was a snake of mud and rocks. As I drove, dodging potholes with a muscle memory sharper than my brain, I thought about my strategy. DA Marshall would do his job in the city, tracking the money, freezing accounts, prepping the arrest warrant. But my job was here, on the ground. I had to armor the estate, batten down the hatches. I rolled into town just as the shops were opening. I parked the truck right in front of the notary's office, accidentally taking up 2 spots, but not caring in the least. People waved as I walked by. "Morning, Mrs. Montgomery." "God bless Mrs. Montgomery." I nodded, serious, impenetrable. I walked into the office of Arthur, the notary, a man my age, with more belly than hair, and an excessive love for cigars. His secretary tried to tell me I had to wait, but I walked right past her and pushed his office door open. "Joe, my God, what a miracle!" Arthur exclaimed, struggling to get out of his chair. "I thought you'd stopped coming down from the mountain." "If Muhammad won't go to the mountain comes down and crushes you, Arthur," I said, sitting across from him and dropping the briefcase on his desk with a heavy thud. "I need to revoke a power of attorney, right now." Arthur caught my tone. His polite smile vanished. "Rogers, that one?" I nodded. Arthur took off his glasses and wiped them with his tie. "It's about time. I've heard rumors. They say the boy's mixed up in bad business in the city. Gambling debts, ghost investments. I was worried he still had signature rights over the ironwood." A cold chill ran down my neck. Rumors had reached all the way out here. And I, the mother, the supposed matriarch who sees everything, was the last to know the sheer scale of the disaster. The shame burned my cheeks, but I turned it into fuel. "Draft the paperwork, Arthur. Total revocation. And I want you to send certified copies to every bank in the county and the public registry before noon. I don't want him able to sell so much as a chicken in my name." While Arthur pecked at his old typewriter with 2 fingers, because he, like me, doesn't trust digital clouds. My mind drifted to my daughters, Kara and Lucy. I had to protect them too. They lived in houses built on subdivided plots of the main ranch. If Roger went down, and he was going to go down hard, the creditors would swoop in like vultures looking for anything with the Montgomery name on it. Arthur, I interrupted the clacking of the keys. How long would it take to transfer the bare ownership of the girls' lots? I want the deeds in their names today, keeping a life estate for myself. That takes time, Joe. The taxes, the registry. I'll pay double for an expedited rush, and you have drinking buddies at the registry office. Move it, you old fox. I don't have time. I walked out of the notary's office an hour later with signed and sealed documents. The sun was high now, biting at my skin. I crossed the square to First Ag Bank. That was a different story. The branch manager is a new guy, young, the type who wears shiny suits and pointy shoes. He looked at me with a hint of condescension when I walked into his office, probably judging my muddy boots and work clothes. Mrs. Montgomery, what a pleasure. Coming in to renew a CD? He asked with a plastic smile. I'm here to withdraw the payroll in cash and close 2 checking accounts. The kid blinked. But, Mrs. Montgomery, moving that much cash is dangerous. And closing accounts, we have preferential rates right now if you maintain your balance. I leaned over his desk, invading his personal space. He smelled like cheap cologne and ambition. Listen to me closely, son. The money is mine. The bank works for me. I don't work for the bank. I want my money in large bills, and I want the account closure certificates right now. And another thing, if anyone calls asking about my balances, whoever it is, even if he says he's my son, and you leak a single digit, I swear on my mother's grave I will buy this bank just to fire you. The kid swallowed hard. 5 minutes later, I walked out with a thick manila envelope and the satisfaction of having cut another thread in the web. Walking back to the truck, I felt exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the fatigue of age, the very thing Roger despised so much, was coming to collect its toll. I leaned against the hot hood of the beast for a second. The town square was bustling with life. Fruit vendors, kids running, scooters honking. Life went on, completely indifferent to my domestic tragedy. That's when I saw it. Parked on the opposite corner, half hidden by a delivery truck, was a black car. Tinted windows, city plates. It didn't belong in our dusty town. A man was leaning against the door, smoking, staring dead at the notary's office I had just walked out of. He wore dark sunglasses and a shirt that was too tight. My instinct, sharpened by years of dealing with pests and cattle rustlers, flared up. That man wasn't a tourist. That man was a lookout. Who was he watching? Me? Or was he looking for Roger? If Roger owed money to dangerous people, and they knew his mother owned land, then this wasn't just a legal problem anymore. It was a physical one. Roger, in his infinite stupidity, hadn't just robbed me. He had brought the wolves to my front door. I got into the truck, trying not to look directly at the black car. I started the engine and pulled out slowly, controlling the shake in my hands. Not from fear, I repeated to myself. From rage, I drove back to the ranch, but this time I wasn't looking at the scenery. I was checking the rearview mirror. The black car didn't follow me, but its presence was burned into my retinas. When I got back to the ironwood, Elias opened the gate for me. I drove in and killed the engine. The silence of the country welcomed me, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a tense calm, the kind before a hurricane. I walked into the house and went straight to the landline. I dialed Kara's number. Honey, come up to the main house. Bring Lucy, and bring the kids. Mom, is something wrong? You sound weird. Nothing I can't fix, but I want you girls up here. We're having pot roast for dinner like the old days, and you're sleeping over. But Mom, the kids have school tomorrow. I said come over. My voice cracked louder than I intended, a whip that cut off my daughter's objection. That's an order, Kara. I expect you in an hour. I hung up. I sat in my leather armchair with the envelope of cash in my lap and the notary documents on the table. Roger thought I was a helpless old woman sitting on a pile of money. He thought draining that account was his masterstroke. Poor fool. He didn't know that account was just the tip of the iceberg. I looked at my hands, old woman hands, liver spots and bulging veins. But these were the hands that had held this family together when everything was collapsing. The plan was in motion. The DA's legal trap was set. The financial armor was in place. Now, it was time for territorial defense. I stood up and walked to the closet where we keep the tools that aren't for farming. There, wrapped in an oiled cloth, was my husband's old pump-action shotgun. I hadn't fired it in 15 years. I picked it up, feeling the familiar weight of the steel and wood. I racked the slide. It was flawless. Elias had maintained it well. I pulled a box of shells from the top shelf. "You're old now. What do you want it for?" Roger had asked. I loaded the first shell with a metallic clack that echoed in the empty room. "I want it to survive, my son," I said to the empty air. "I want it to make sure that when you come to claim what you think is yours, you find out the old lady still has teeth." I sat back down with the weapon resting across my knees, staring out the window at the entrance to the ranch. Evening was falling, and the shadows were stretching over the fields. I was tired, yes. My back ached, yes. But I was awake, more awake than ever, and I was waiting. The rain started falling right as the headlights of Kara's car illuminated the driveway. It wasn't a shy drizzle. It was a downpour, the kind that hammers the tin roof like it wants to tear the house down. A blinding storm that erased the hills and turned the night pitch black. I stayed on the porch with the shotgun, unloaded but within reach, leaning against the wall behind a fern planter, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. My daughters ran up the steps, covering their heads with old newspapers, followed by my 3 grandkids, who were laughing like this was an adventure and not an emergency bunker. "Mom!" Lucy yelled, soaked, pushing the kids inside. "What a storm! Are you okay? You scared us with that call." I hugged them. They smelled like rain and basic soap, the smell of honest people. I closed the front door and threw all 3 deadbolts, the top one, the bottom one, and the heavy wooden crossbar my late husband installed during the bad old days. "I'm fine," I lied. Even though the tension made my shoulders feel like granite, I just wanted them close. With weather like this, the roads get dangerous. I didn't want you girls alone down there. Kara, who has always been the sharpest, caught a glimpse of the shotgun half hidden behind the ferns before I shut the door completely. She didn't say a word, but her eyes darkened. She knows that at the Ironwood, we don't bring out the guns just to dust them. I served the pot roast. The steam from the big pot fogged up the kitchen windows, and for a moment, with the clinking of spoons and the kids laughing and asking for more cornbread, it felt like a normal night. But my mind was somewhere else. It was on the screen of my cell phone, vibrating in my pocket every 5 minutes with bank notifications. They weren't alarm messages. They were the silent confirmations that my plan was executing perfectly. Activity detected, outbound transfer, destination, external account, amount, total available balance. Roger hadn't wasted any time. Surely, in his new rich euphoria, he was moving the money from the trap account into other accounts, scattering it, thinking he was a financial genius. What he didn't know was that every digital move left an indelible footprint, a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to his jail cell. At 9 p.m., when the kids were finally asleep in a pile in the guest room and my daughters were washing the dishes, my phone rang. It was D.A. Marshall. I stepped out into the hallway, out of earshot of the girls. The rain had slowed to a steady, monotonous drumming. "Mrs. Montgomery," the deep voice said on the other end. "Do we have him? Did he move it?" I asked in a whisper. "All of it?" And he made the rookie mistake we were hoping for. He wired it directly to an offshore account in a tax haven that the DEA already had flagged in another investigation. By mixing it with those funds, your son just tripped international alarms. It's not just domestic theft anymore, Mrs. Montgomery. It's money laundering. I felt my legs give way, and I had to lean against the wall. It's one thing to want to teach a straying son a lesson. It's a very different thing to know you are actively pushing him off a cliff. But I remembered his voice. "You're old now, what do you want it for?" I remembered the black car watching the town. I remembered that if I didn't stop him, the loan sharks would. And they don't use handcuffs and lawyers, they use lead. "Proceed, counselor," I said, closing my eyes. "When do you arrest him?" "The warrant drops first thing tomorrow morning. But before that, we freeze everything. Right now, our techs are locking down not just the account he drained, but every account tied to his social security number. Credit cards, savings, investments. In 10 minutes, your son will cease to exist financially." "Thank you, Mr. Marshall." I hung up. I stood in the dim hallway for a moment, looking at the framed photos of my kids on the wall. There was Roger at his graduation, in his cap and gown, smiling like he was going to eat the world. Now, the world was eating him. I went back to the kitchen. Kara and Lucy were sitting at the table with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Mom," Lucy said bluntly, "we saw the notary papers on the desk. Why did you put the land in our names today?" I sat across from them. I took both of their hands, hard-working hands that looked so much like mine when I was their age. "Because there is a storm coming that's worse than the one outside, girls. And I need you to be safe." I told them what they needed to know. I didn't tell them their brother was going to prison. I didn't have the heart for that yet. I told them Roger had dangerous debts, that he had tried to mortgage the ranch behind my back, and that I had to armor the estate. I told them about the black car in town. Kara's face went pale. "That's why the shotgun. That's why the shotgun. And that's why Elias is standing guard at the gate," I confirmed. "Roger made severe mistakes. I am fixing them my way. But I need you to trust me. And do not answer your phones if he calls." At that exact moment, the landline in the living room started ringing. The shrill ring shattered the intimate atmosphere of the kitchen. Once, twice, 3 times. No one moved. "It must be him," Lucy whispered. "Let it ring," I ordered. The landline stopped, but instantly, the cell phone started. Kara's, then Lucy's, and finally, mine. I looked at the screen. "Son." I took a deep breath. It was time for phase 2, the indirect confrontation. I answered. "Mom." Roger's voice sounded completely different from this afternoon. The arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a high pitch of hysteria. "Mom, something's wrong with the bank." "What's wrong, son?" I replied with glacial calm, sitting back down in my leather chair. "Didn't you say the system worked perfectly?" "No, you don't understand. I went to pay the tab at the restaurant, and the card declined. I went to an ATM, and it swallowed my card. I try to log into the app, and it says, 'User locked for security.'" "Mom, did you do something? You called the bank, didn't you? Tell them to unlock it right now." I have people waiting for a massive payment. There it was. The fear. "I haven't called anyone, Roger. I told you that account was mine. That was ranch money. You took it. Maybe the bank noticed some unusual activity. It's a lot of money for someone who doesn't declare an income, don't you think?" "Don't play dumb," he screamed, and I heard the genuine panic in his throat. "You know something? That money was for an investment. If I don't pay tonight, I lose the deal. And these are people you don't mess with." "Well, it looks like you played and lost, son." "Mom, for God's sake!" His voice broke. "It's not just an investment. I owe money. If I don't pay, they're going to kill me." My daughters were staring at me, wide-eyed, hearing the screaming pouring out of the receiver. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I held my ground. If I caved now, if I gave him money, I'd only be feeding the beast chasing him. The only way to save his life was for the law to get to him before the debt collectors did. "Roger," I said, hardening my voice, "I warned you. I told you a mother is to be respected. Now figure it out like the man you claim to be. There is no money here at the Ironwood to fund your vices. I'm coming up there," he threatened. "I'm coming up there, and I'll take what's mine the hard way if I have to." "I'll be waiting," I replied, and hung up. The silence that followed was like a graveyard. "Is he coming here?" Kara asked, trembling. "Let him come," I said, standing up. "He's 4 hours away, and with this rain, it'll take him 6. By the time he gets here, the sun will be up." But it wasn't Roger who arrived first. Around 3 a.m., the frantic barking of the dogs woke us up. Elias banged on the back door. "Boss," he called out, "the black car is at the entrance. They broke the padlock on the lower gate." I had my boots on in 2 seconds. I grabbed the shotgun and a heavy-duty flashlight. "You do not leave this room," I told my daughters, who were hugging the sleeping children. "Call the local police. Tell them we have intruders. Do not mention Roger." I stepped out onto the veranda. The rain had stopped, leaving a thick, freezing fog. In the distance, I saw the headlight beams of a car creeping up the gravel drive toward the main house. They were moving slowly, like sharks in shallow water. It was the creditors. Roger, in his desperation, must have told them he was coming here to get the cash. Or maybe they tracked down that his mother owned property. They weren't coming to collect. They were coming to loot. I stood on the top step of the porch. Elias was right beside me, his machete in hand, his face carved out of stone. "Hit the yard floods, Elias," I ordered. When the car was 60 feet away, Elias threw the breaker. 4 massive halogen floodlights bathed the yard in blinding white light. The car slammed on the brakes, sliding in the mud. I brought the stock of the shotgun to my shoulder. I didn't aim at the men. I aimed at the sky. But my posture was clear. 2 men stepped out, shielding their eyes with their arms. City boys, wearing leather jackets and shoes with absolutely no traction for the mud. "We're looking for Roger Montgomery," one of them yelled, trying to sound intimidating despite being blinded. "No, Roger lives here," I yelled back, my voice carrying the absolute authority of 50 years running this land. "This is private property. You have 3 seconds to turn around before I let the catchdogs loose and start shooting out your tires." "We know the old lady has money," the other one barked, taking a step forward. "This old lady is 78 years old, has terrible aim, and very little patience," I replied, and fired into the sky. The boom of the shotgun echoed through the valley like thunder. Birds exploded out of the nearby trees. The men instinctively ducked. "The next one goes in your radiator," I warned, racking the next shell with a metallic clack that rang crystal clear in the night air. "Get out!" "The cops are already on their way." It wasn't an empty threat. Down in the valley, on the main highway, the red and blue flashes of the rural sheriff's cruisers were already visible. DA Marshall hadn't just frozen the accounts. He had put a priority alert on my ranch. The men from the black car saw the lights. They saw me, standing like a statue of vengeance under the floodlights, and they made the smart choice. They scrambled back into the car, threw it in reverse, and tore out of there, sliding back down the hill. I lowered the gun. My hands were shaking slightly, but my heart was beating in a strong, steady rhythm. Elias looked at me and spit on the ground. "Cowardly bastards. They think just because a woman has gray hair, she's soft. The world has forgotten what women from our generation are made of, Elias," I said, watching the police cruisers getting closer. But tonight, we reminded them. I went back inside. My daughters were pale, peering out the window. "They're gone," I told them, dropping the shotgun into the umbrella stand. "You can breathe now." I poured myself a glass of water and checked the clock. It was 4 a.m. Dawn wasn't far off. My cell phone vibrated again. A text message. It wasn't from the bank or the DA. It was from Roger. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm at the toll booth. I'm out of gas. My cards decline. I'm scared." I read the message and felt an infinite sadness, deep as a well. My boy, my arrogant boy, reduced to a terrified child stranded on the highway. But I didn't reply. I didn't send him money. I didn't tell him to come up. I replied with a single sentence, knowing it would be the last thing I'd say to him before the police intercepted him at the toll plaza, where they were undoubtedly already waiting, thanks to his cell phone ping. I typed with clumsy but determined fingers. "Fear is a good thing, son. Fear teaches you what love couldn't." I left the phone on the table and went to the window to watch the sunrise. The sky was starting to lighten, a pale gray that promised a clear day after the storm. I had won tonight's battle. I had protected my land and my girls. But the war wasn't over. Now came the hardest part, watching my own flesh and blood fall, and refusing to reach out a hand to catch him. Because sometimes, for a man to stand up straight, he has to hit the hardest, coldest rock bottom there is. And I, Josephine Montgomery, had just pushed my son into the abyss, praying he'd grow wings before he hit the ground. Dawn arrived with a deceptive calm, the kind that feels like the dead air right before a dam breaks. The grayish light filtered through the lace curtains, illuminating the dust floating in the room like suspended particles of time. I hadn't slept a wink all night. I sat in the armchair with the shotgun across my lap, watching over my sleeping daughters and grandchildren, like an old lioness who might not have sharp claws anymore, but still has a bite that crushes bone. I stood up slowly. My hips protested with a dry pop, reminding me that the dampness of the storm had seeped right down to the marrow. I left the unloaded weapon in the gun cabinet and went to the kitchen. I needed coffee. I needed the bitterness of the roasted beans to wash the taste of ash out of my mouth. Kara walked in shortly after, her eyes puffy and her hair a mess. "Mom," she said quietly, like she was afraid to break the silence. "The vultures are gone." "They're gone, honey, but the carrion is still on its way," I replied, pouring her a mug. Sit down. Today is not going to be an easy day. Elias came through the back door, wiping his boots on the jute mat. His face was severe, marked by the long night's watch. Boss, there's a car coming up. It's not the cops. It's Mr. Rogers' BMW. He's coming slow. Sounds like the engine is knocking. I nodded, stirring my coffee with a silver spoon. Let him in, Elias. But don't close the gate behind him. We're going to need a clear path very soon. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, smelling of wet earth and ripe fruit. I saw my son's car appear around the bend by the mango trees. It didn't have its usual elegance. It was plastered in mud up to the windows, with a bumper dragging, probably the result of hitting something in his desperate midnight flight. The engine coughed and died right in front of the house steps, exhaling a cloud of black smoke that stained the purity of the morning. Roger stepped out. I had never seen him like this. His designer suit was wrinkled, his tie undone, and his face was unhinged, pale, covered in 2 days of stubble that made him look like a castaway. But what struck me most were his eyes, red, bloodshot with fury and terror. He took the steps 2 at a time, ignoring Elias, who kept a safe distance with his hand resting near his machete. You! He screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this to me! My daughters stepped out behind me, terrified, but I raised a hand to keep them back. This was a conversation between the creator and her monster. Good morning to you too, son, I said, keeping my voice level, cold as spring water. I see you made it. I thought you were going to run out of gas at the toll plaza. They locked everything, he roared, grabbing his head. Everything, Mom! I went to get gas and the card declined. I tried to pull cash and the ATM swallowed the plastic. I had to leave my watch, my Rolex, as collateral for 5 gallons of gas at some dive station. Your watch. A watch bought with money that wasn't yours, Roger. He froze, breathing heavily. He stepped closer, invading my space, trying to use his height to intimidate me. He forgot that I've stared down breeding bulls meaner than him. What did you do? He hissed through his teeth. I called the bank. They told me my accounts are under federal investigation. Federal. Mom, do you know what that means? They think I'm laundering money. I stared at him, feeling a profound, necessary pity. They don't think it, Roger. They know it. He blinked, confused by my answer. What are you talking about? I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the paper D.A. Marshall had faxed me 2 days ago, folded into quarters. I unfolded it carefully and handed it to him. Read it. Roger took it. His eyes scanned the lines, and I watched the color drain completely from his face, leaving it ash gray. This says the first ag account was flagged. What is this? It was bait. It was a mousetrap, son. And the mouse was so hungry and so arrogant that he didn't even smell the cheese before he bit down. The paper slipped from his fingers onto the wet floorboards of the porch. Roger stumbled backward, as if I had physically slapped him. You set me up? He asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. Your own son? My thief of a son, I corrected, my tone hardening. My son who told me to my face that I was old and didn't need my own money. My son who forged my signature for months. Did you think I wasn't going to find out? Did you think gray hair meant my brain was rotting? I needed it, he screamed again. But this time it was a scream of desperation, not an attack. Those people are going to kill me, Mom. The men in the black car, the ones who came last night. I owe a lot of money. If I don't pay them today, I'm a dead man. Those men aren't going to touch a hair on your head, Roger. Oh, really? You're going to scare them off with your prayers. You don't know who I messed with. I know exactly who you messed with. That's why I did what I did. I took a step toward him. Despite my 78 years, I felt like I was growing, my shadow stretching out to cover him. I'd rather see you in prison than in a coffin, Roger. He looked at me in absolute horror. Prison? The money you stole from that account. When it hit your personal accounts, it mixed with funds the feds were already tracking for other crimes. When you moved it to that offshore haven, you tripped an international wire alert. It's not a family dispute anymore, son. It's a federal crime against the state. You turned me in, he sobbed, dropping to his knees on the wooden deck. Your own blood. You're a monster. I am your mother, I said, feeling the tears burning my eyes but refusing to let them fall. And a mother does whatever it takes for her son to survive. Even if it means breaking his legs so he stops running off a cliff. Those men from the black car can't collect from a federal inmate. Your debts are frozen or written off because all your assets are seized. In prison, you'll be safe. Out here, you're a corpse. Roger buried his face in his hands and started to cry. An ugly, noisy cry. The cry of a spoiled child facing a real consequence for the very first time. Right then, the sound of sirens shattered the morning. It wasn't just one, it was several. Police cruisers and a black armored government SUV were coming up the gravel drive. My daughters rushed to my side. Lucy grabbed my arm. "Mom, what's going to happen?" "Justice, honey. Justice is going to happen." The vehicles came to a halt behind Roger's car. Several uniformed agents stepped out with long rifles, keeping them pointed at the ground. A man in a gray suit with glasses and a briefcase stepped out of the SUV. "D.A. Marshall." Roger lifted his head. Seeing the cops, he tried to stand up to run, but his legs wouldn't respond. He just stayed there, kneeling in the mud and wood, shaking. The DA walked up the steps and stopped in front of me. He took off his glasses as a sign of respect. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm sorry it had to happen this way." "Do what you have to do, Mr. Marshall," I said, handing him a folder I had prepped on the porch table. It contained the logs of every time Roger had accessed my computer, dates, times, the final proof that it wasn't a mistake but premeditation. 2 agents walked up to Roger and hauled him up without an ounce of gentleness. "Roger Montgomery, you are under arrest for bank fraud, money laundering, and forgery of private documents," one of the officers recited as he slapped the cuffs on him. The metallic click-clack echoed in the silence of the valley like a gunshot. Roger looked at me. There was no arrogance left, just infinite terror. "Mom?" he begged. "Mom, don't let them take me. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave me permission." I walked up to him. I stroked his dirty cheek with my calloused hand. The same hand that had changed his diapers, that had bandaged his scraped knees, and that was now signing his sentence. "I can't lie, son. I raised you better than that. You're going to go with these men now. You're going to pay your debt to society. And when you get out, if you come out a good man, your mother will be right here waiting for you with a plate of hot food." But the Roger who stole from his mother, that Roger dies today. "Mom!" he screamed as they dragged him toward the cruiser. I watched him get shoved into the back seat. I watched him bang his head against the glass. I watched the cruiser turn around and drive away, taking my only son. The heir who could have been, but wasn't. When the vehicles disappeared and the dust settled, I felt my strength completely abandon me. I collapsed into the wicker chair. Kara and Lucy knelt beside me, hugging me, crying silently. "It's over," I told them, stroking their hair. "It's over." But it wasn't completely over. There was one last thing. Mid-morning, when the sun was beating down hard, Arthur the notary arrived. He was sweating through his wrinkled linen suit. "Joe, my God, the whole town is in an uproar. They say they hauled Roger away." "That's right, Arthur. I assume you brought the new deeds for the girls and the revocation of the power of attorney." He placed the documents on the table. I took the revocation, the piece of paper that stripped Roger of any right over my land, my cattle, my life. I signed it with a steady hand. "Is there anything else, Arthur?" I asked. "I want you to draft a new document, not a will, an irrevocable family trust. I want the ironwood bulletproof. I want it so that nobody, not my daughters, not my grandkids, and certainly not me, can sell it or mortgage it without the unanimous consent of every adult member of the family. And I want Elias listed on the board of trustees." My daughters looked up, stunned. Elias, who was standing at the corner of the porch, took off his hat. "Boss, I'm not family. You are more family than the man they just hauled away in handcuffs, Elias. You've defended this land with your life. You've earned the right to have a say in it." Elias bowed his head, hiding the emotion in his dark eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery." I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. I looked at my land. The coffee fields glowed a vibrant green under the sun, washed clean by last night's storm. They looked strong, renewed. The invisibility was broken. For years, I was just the old lady in the corner, the one who signed checks and knitted scarves. Today, the whole town, the bank, the feds, and my own family knew exactly who Josephine Montgomery really was. I pulled out my old cell phone. I had a voicemail from an unknown number. I played it. It was the voice of one of the creditors, the guy from the black car. "Mrs. Montgomery, we saw the news. Your son is in federal custody. We consider the debt uncollectible at this time. We won't bother you again. Have a good day." I smiled bitterly. Respect. That elusive animal you can sometimes only catch by baring your teeth. I turned to my daughters. "Kara, Lucy, dry those tears. We have a lot of work to do. Roger left an administrative disaster, and we have to audit every invoice from the last 3 years. And you, Kara, you are going to learn how to manage the ledgers. No more secrets, and no more depending on anyone else to tell us what our sweat is worth." "Yes, Mom," Kara said, standing up straighter. I saw a new gleam in her eyes, a spark of the same iron that had kept me standing all these years. "And Lucy," I continued, "I want you to go into town and talk to the bank manager. Tell him I am coming in personally tomorrow to renegotiate the terms of our credit lines. And tell him if he looks at me with pity one more time, I will withdraw every last red cent and stuff it under my mattress." Lucy smiled, a shy but genuine smile. "I'll tell him, Mom." The house, which hours ago felt like a cold tomb full of fear, was starting to breathe again. The air was moving. The weight of Roger's lies and theft had been lifted, leaving a space that was painful but clean. I went to my study. I sat at the empty desk where the bait computer used to be. I opened the drawer and took out the family photo. I stared at it for a long time. Roger's smiling face looked back at me. I didn't tear it up. I didn't put it away. I left it right there, dead center on the desk. It would be my constant reminder. A reminder that a mother's love isn't blind. A mother's love has to be visionary, strategic, and sometimes it has to be the executioner. The phone rang. It was D.A. Marshall again. "Mrs. Montgomery, Roger is being processed. The judge ordered him held without bail as a flight risk. He asked me to pass along a message." "Go ahead," he said. "Tell my mom she was right. Fear teaches." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I had been holding since I discovered the theft. "Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Keep me informed." I hung up. I felt old. Yes, older than yesterday. Every bone ached, and my heart felt shriveled up like a raisin. But at the same time, I felt absolute clarity. I had taken back control. I had taken back my name. I got up and walked to the window. Down in the yard, my grandkids were playing with the dogs, completely oblivious to the tragedy, oblivious to the fact that their uncle would sleep on a concrete slab tonight. Life went on, the ranch went on, and I, Josephine Montgomery, was still standing here to make sure nobody ever forgot that the roots of this tree run deep. And even if the trunk looks dried out, the sap is pumping stronger than ever. The revelation wasn't just for Roger. It was for everyone. Now they knew the old woman wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own destiny. And God help anyone who tried to tear down what my hands built. 3 months have passed since the cruiser drove down the hill taking my son away, and the silence of the ironwood has changed its color. Before, the silence was a heavy blanket, woven with the anxiety of waiting for the next disaster, the next collection call, Roger's next lie. Now the silence is green and productive. It's the sound of the wind rustling the coffee leaves. It's the distant lowing of the cattle in the new pasture. And above all, it's the peace of knowing the foundation of this house no longer has termites eating away at the wood. I adjusted my shawl over my shoulders as I stepped out of the beast in front of First Ag Bank. I wasn't here to close accounts or yell at anyone this time. I was here to sign. But the entrance was different. The security guard, a kid who used to completely ignore me, snapped to attention like a 4-star general had just walked in, opening the door for me with an exaggerated bow. Inside, the usual murmur of the teller lines stopped for a split second. I felt the stares. They weren't looks of pity for the poor widow with the deadbeat son anymore. They were looks of respect, mixed with a healthy dose of awe. Small-town gossip flows faster than water down a hill. Everyone knew Josephine Montgomery had handed her own son over to the feds to save the family estate. Some called me the Iron Lady. Others whispered I had a heart of stone. I don't care about either. Stones are what hold up bridges, and iron is what keeps the roof from caving in. The manager, the same kid in the shiny suit with the plastic smile, practically ran out of his office. Mrs. Montgomery, what an honor to have you in today, he said, and I noticed his palms were sweating. Please, come in, come in. We have the restructuring paperwork ready, exactly as you requested. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk. I didn't smile. I hope the rates are the ones we discussed on the phone, son. I don't have time to read the fine print today. Absolutely, Mrs. Montgomery. Everything is in order. Preferred high-tier client rates, zero risk. I signed the documents with my fountain pen, the nib scratching the paper with authority. When I finished, I looked up and met his eyes. One more thing. I want you to authorize my daughter, Kara, as a secondary signer on the operating accounts. She'll be in tomorrow to register her signature, and I expect you to treat her with the exact same diligence you treat me. If she says the sky is green, you paint the ceiling green. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear. I walked out of the bank with my head held high. The sun in the plaza hit my face, but it felt good. It felt clean. I had taken back control of my money, but more importantly, I had taken back the dignity of my family name. Nobody would ever look at the Montgomerys like easy marks again. The drive back to the ranch was peaceful. When I arrived, I saw Kara and Lucy out on the drying patio, wearing wide-brimmed hats, clipboards in hand, arguing with the pickers about the quality of the beans. I stopped for a moment to watch them from the truck. For years, I made the mistake of raising my daughters to be nice girls, soft, domestic, while I poured all my hopes for leadership into Roger, just because he was a boy. It was my fault, a sexist blind spot inherited from my father. But the crisis had woken them up. Kara, who used to shake if she had to scold a dog, was now pointing at a sack of coffee with absolute authority, demanding the foreman weigh it again. Lucy was tracking the numbers on a tablet, her brow furrowed, calculating profit margins. I stepped out of the truck, and Elias walked over to greet me. How did it go in town, boss? We own the bank, Elias. And the girls? I pointed with my chin toward the patio. The girls are lionesses. Elias smiled, showing his tobacco-stained teeth. Blood runs thick, Mrs. Montgomery. They just needed you to let off the reins. That afternoon, I prepared for what I knew would be the hardest part of my victory. I packed a basket with food, cornbread, sharp cheddar, peach preserves, and a thermos of black coffee. They weren't luxuries. They were the tastes of home. I asked Elias to drive me to the city, to the federal penitentiary. The drive took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the landscape pass by, watching the green of the mountains turn into the gray of asphalt and concrete. Federal prison is an ugly place. A building that looks like a concrete shoebox surrounded by razor wire. The air in there smells like confinement and cheap bleach. I went through security. They searched my basket. They broke the cornbread in half to make sure nothing was baked inside. They sniffed the coffee. I swallowed the humiliation with my back straight. I am a mother, and mothers can endure anything. When I finally sat down in the visitation room on the other side of the bulletproof glass, my heart was beating in my throat like a trapped bird. Roger walked through the metal door. He was wearing beige inmate scrubs. His head was shaved, and he had lost weight. A lot of weight. He didn't have his good life gut or his country club tan anymore. He looked pale, hollow-eyed. He looked human. He sat across from me and picked up the black phone hanging on the wall. I did the same. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice sounded hoarse, small. "Hi, son. I brought you some food, but they said they'll give it to you later." Roger nodded, staring at his hands clasped on the metal table. Hands that no longer had manicures. Hands that were starting to show work calluses. Because in that place, everyone is put to work. "How's the ranch?" he asked, without looking me in the eye. "Good. The harvest is coming in strong this year. Kara is handling payroll, and Lucy is dealing with the suppliers. We're keeping the business moving. I'm glad." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. "Mom, I've had a lot of time to think in here. Too much time." "You have too much time when you don't have freedom." "Roger." He looked up. His eyes were watering. "The lawyers say if I plead guilty and return what's left in the frozen accounts, they can knock the sentence down to 4 years. Maybe 3, with good behavior." "That sounds reasonable," I said, keeping my composure. "It's better than spending 10 years fighting a lie." "Mom," his voice broke, "those men, the ones from the black car, did they come back?" "No. When the news broke about your arrest and the feds freezing your assets, They understood you were untouchable. You can't collect from a federal inmate. They wrote you off as a total loss. Roger closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his scruffy cheek. You saved my life, didn't you? He whispered. I was so angry that day. I thought you hated me. I thought you wanted to destroy me. But if you had given me the money, if you had let me walk away, they would have killed me the second the cash ran out. I placed my hand on the glass, right where his was on the other side. The glass was freezing, but I felt a connection I hadn't felt since he was a little boy. A mother's love isn't always sweet, Roger. Sometimes it's bitter as medicine. Sometimes love is a cage, so the wolves don't eat you. I put you in here because in here, you are alive. And as long as you are alive, there's a chance that someday you'll be the man your father wanted you to be. I'm sorry, Mom. Forgive me for calling you old. Forgive me for stealing from you. Forgiveness is earned, son. Not with words, but with actions. Serve your time. Learn to live with little. Cleanse your soul of the greed that rotted you out. When you walk out those doors, if you walk out clean, the ironwood will have a place for you. Not as the boss, not as the owner, as a ranch hand. You will have to earn your keep just like Elias does, just like your sisters do. Roger nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Understood, boss. I smiled. A sad but genuine smile. It was the first time in 20 years he had called me that with respect instead of mockery. Take care of yourself, son. I'll come back next month. I hung up the phone and stood up. I walked out of the prison without looking back, because if I looked back, I would break down. And Josephine Montgomery does not break down in public. I cried in the truck. Yes, I cried silently while Elias drove back up the mountain. I cried for the lost time, for the necessary pain, for the trauma of amputating a piece of your life to save the rest. But when I saw the wooden sign for the Ironwood Ranch appear at sunset, I wiped my tears away. That night, we hosted a dinner on the patio. It wasn't a celebration, it was an assembly. My daughters were there, my grandkids, Elias, and even the family lawyer. I want to make an announcement, I said, standing up at the head of the table. Everyone went quiet. The sound of the crickets filled the space. I pulled out the new corporate ledger for the ranch. For a long time, I thought my duty was to protect all of you from reality. I thought my strength was enough. But old age, the very thing Roger used to insult me, has actually been my greatest teacher. It taught me that nobody lives forever, and that power that isn't shared eventually rots. I looked at Kara and Lucy. As of today, the management of the ranch is shared. You both have signing authority and voting rights. I am keeping veto power, because I'm still the owner, and because I still have my teeth. But you two will run the day-to-day. My daughters looked at each other, shocked and emotional. And you, Mom? Are you retiring? Lucy asked. I let out a dry laugh that sent a couple of doves flying off the roof. Retire? Honey, I'm going to die with my boots on. But now I'm going to focus on what I actually love. The land. I'm going to walk the fields again. I'm going to check the grafts. I'm going to fight the pests. I'm leaving the spreadsheets and the bankers to you two. I am going back to the dirt. I looked at my grandkids, who were staring at me with wide eyes. And you lot, I pointed at them, are going to learn a few things this summer. No video games all day. You're going to learn how to milk cows, how to plant, and how to understand that money doesn't come out of an ATM. It comes from sweat and dirt. Because the day I'm gone, I don't want some city slicker coming out here and hustling you. The dinner continued with laughter and planning. You could breathe a new air. It was no longer an absolute monarchy where I carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. It was a family with scars, yes, but scar tissue is tougher than regular skin. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, I stayed out on the porch alone. The night was clear, completely full of stars. I rocked gently in my wicker chair, listening to the familiar creak of the wood. I pulled the letter I had received that morning out of my pocket. It was from D.A. Marshall. It said that the investigation into the money laundering ring had advanced massively thanks to Roger's arrest and the data from his accounts. Big fish had gone down. My trap, my agonizing mother's trap, had served a purpose far bigger than just my own house. I looked at my hands in the moonlight. They were old, wrinkled, covered in liver spots. Roger had asked me, "You're old now, what do you want it for?" He meant the money. Now, I have a crystal clear answer. I didn't want it to buy jewelry, or trips, or empty luxuries. I wanted it for this: to have the freedom to decide, to have the power to protect, to be able to sit in this chair, under this roof that my husband and I built, and know that nobody, absolutely nobody, can pull me out of here until God calls my name. Old age isn't a sentence. It's a privilege. It is the accumulation of every battle won and lost. And as long as I have my memory, as long as I have my voice, and as long as I have this dirt under my boots, I will still be the boss. I turned off the porch light and went inside, closing the door softly, but firmly. Tomorrow, I have to wake up early. I have to check the fence on the south pasture and teach my oldest grandson how to sharpen a machete. Life goes on, and Josephine Montgomery is just starting her second harvest. The house went quiet, but it wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was the fertile silence of someone who sleeps peacefully, knowing the ledgers are balanced and the wolves are finally kept at bay.